All right, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our KaiNexus Training Team Office Hours webinar, episode 5, aka the Banner Rippey Show. My name is Ryan Rippey, and I am the Customer Enablement Manager here at KaiNexus. Unfortunately, my partner in crime, Matt Banna, is feeling under the weather today, so looks like it's just the Rippey Show. For those of you new to our webinar series, welcome aboard. The way this works is I plan to nerd out here for the next 30 minutes or so on a KaiNexus topic that I'll share with everyone here in just a bit. The purpose of these webinars is for us to review the hottest topics and latest and greatest features suggested by our customers. So before I reveal our topic for today, let's just go over some housekeeping items. Now, the webinar is being recorded, so we'll go ahead and send out the slides as well as the recording to everyone after the webinar. Also, if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to type those into the chat box. I will do my best to answer those in real time as well as at the very end of the webinar if there's some time left over. We've received a ton of feedback from our last webinar as well as numerous requests from customers on our chosen topic. So without further ado, our topic for today is escalation. All right, let's take a look at what's on our agenda. So first, following the steps of Simon Sinek, we'll want to start with the why behind escalation in KaiNexus. After that, we'll dive into KaiNexus and do a quick review of the network. From there, we will go over the difference between escalate, transfer, and notify on an improvement. With that knowledge in place, we will take a look at the different configuration options for escalation. And to cap things off, we will take a look at an example use case escalation process built out. And as I said previously, if there is time left over at the end, we can answer any questions that you all have. So let's start with why. Why might we want to escalate an improvement in KaiNexus? Escalation can be used in a couple different scenarios. So the first could be as a way to notify people of a critical issue. The second may be as a way to ask for help. And a third option could be as a way to remind people of an improvement that is not being acted upon quickly enough. All right, now that we've explored the why, let's go ahead, jump out of this PowerPoint, and we will sign into KaiNexus. All right, let's go ahead and sign into KaiNexus. So I've gone ahead and configured a default dashboard called My Board that we'll just do a quick overview of, and we'll come back to this board probably towards the end of this webinar today. So here on this default dashboard, we have 4 cards. The top left, My Tasks. Top right, we have My Improvements in the Kanban view. Bottom left, we have My Projects in a nice tree view. And then the very bottom right is going to be My Escalated Improvements. We'll take a look at this card in particular towards the end of our webinar today. All right, so let's start things off. We'll go into the admin section here in the bottom left of our advanced toolbar. And let's take a look at our network and just do a refresher of this before we get into escalation. So the network is, in KaiNexus, your organization's unique structure or hierarchy. Okay, a network location is a group of users or a work unit. Every user in KaiNexus must be associated with at least one network location. So typically what department you work in and what you oversee will determine what network location or locations you should live in. A user's network location in combination with their roles determines what they can see, what they can do, and what sort of notifications that you'll receive in KaiNexus. Every workflow is also tied to a network location. So when I, for example, create a new improvement in the system during our webinar today, my network location is initially going to be associated with that new improvement as the originating location. So if we take a look at our user profile, let's go up here in the top right. I'm just going to click on my name here. take a look at a quick snapshot of my user profile, we'll see for my network location that I'm under this sports medicine sub-department here. So if we come back to our network, let's actually search for that sports medicine location. So you'll see this is where my user is located in the network in KaiNexus, okay? So just kind of foreshadowing, by default, if I was to escalate an improvement, it would go one level up to this orthopedics department, okay? So one thing I want to point out here is that for any of our admins that are on this webinar today, you have the ability to change this default escalation location. So again, sports medicine by default would go up to orthopedics when escalating an improvement. If I hover over my sports medicine and come over to the little pencil icon here and edit, we'll see at the very bottom here I have this escalate to. So by default, it's that one level above. If, for example, let's come back here, if we wanted to have maybe sports medicine escalate all the way up to our top level Houston hospital, then when we come in and edit this particular location and change our escalate to, we could type in, for example, Houston Hospital. And so that would be our new location that this would escalate to, okay? So just something that I want to point out here while we're in the network. All right, let's go ahead and get into some creation and configuration. So currently the only workflow that you can escalate in KaiNexus is an improvement. So let's get back onto our default dashboard. Let's go ahead and we'll come up into the create button here and let's create a new improvement. So I'm gonna come over here, grab my improvement. So here on this form, I'm not gonna go through and fill out all of this information here today, but of course, as everyone knows, our title is always gonna be a required text field that we'll have to enter. So let's create an improvement. You know what? I'm sorry, Banna, but maybe I need to find a new co-host. I need somebody who's going to be able to, be in tip-top shape. So let's go ahead. I'm going to create this improvement. And then I can jump directly into that improvement. Let's select that unique generated URL here for the improvement. Expand this so everybody can see this a little bit better. All right, so now that I've created this new improvement, let's go ahead. I'm going to assign this improvement real quick. Maybe I'm going to make myself responsible for working on this, finding that new co-host. Let's give myself a due date. We're going to have that done by the end of next month for our next webinar, right? So maybe by the 21st, and then let's go ahead and assign this. So in terms of accessing the escalation option within an improvement, in order to get there, you're going to click on the ellipses in the top right of your screen. Now, before we go too much further, let's discuss the other options that may be available here to you underneath the ellipses. The first is notify. So selecting notify will allow you to send a written message to the members of your team, or if you want to, you can maybe specify another audience. So you can send it to the members of your team on this particular item, maybe specify a different audience in something about this item. This can be sent as a notification through email or through the digest. And notify can be done on any workflow. Now, different from notify under the ellipses is transfer. So transfer, like escalation, this is specific to improvements. KaiNexus identifies where an improvement took place. So this location is typically determined by the network location of the responsible person. So we'll see here, for example, when I went ahead and assigned this find a new co-host improvement to myself, it grabbed my sports medicine as my responsible location. So if you wanted to change the item's location, you can go in and transfer it. You may want to transfer an improvement if, for example, the responsible person is in a different department than where the improvement is actually taking place, or if the improvement needs to be handled by someone in a completely different location altogether. The assigner, or anyone with the assign permission in KaiNexus, will be able to go in and transfer an improvement. So when transferring an improvement, let's keep in mind what's going to happen when we go ahead and go through that transfer process. So the location is going to be transferred and removed from the list of responsible locations. And so the new location that we're going to ultimately transfer that to is going to be displayed here in that responsible location. Now, anyone who has configured their notification preferences to be notified when improvements in this location are transferred are also going to be alerted. And the last thing that'll happen during the transfer process is we'll have an activity log entry about that transfer added to the improvements timeline here. So let's just take a look at that transfer screen. So hopefully this will make a little bit more sense. If we come into the transfer, we'll see here, as I just mentioned, what happens when I transfer. So people who are normally notified in that location of a new improvement will immediately get notified of this. The first thing that you would have to fill out here in the reason for transfer that will be required. So you'll want to fill out your reason for transfer. You'll want to determine what that new responsible location would be. And then the last section here that's important is we can determine if we want to make this improvement new and clear out that responsible person. So if I hover over this little tooltip, checking this box will place the item in a new status, clear out that responsible person. If you don't check that box, the status and responsible person will remain unchanged. So this is that process for transfer. Now, the transfer option can be a part of the escalation process, as we'll see here in just a bit. But in terms of differentiating the two, again, we talked about the why on escalation. It's a way to notify people of a critical issue. It's a way to ask for help, or it could be a way to remind people of an improvement that's not being acted upon quickly enough. The difference with transferring is that transferring is usually used if we need to change where the improvement should be worked on, okay? All right, so the topic of today's webinar is escalation. So let's talk a little bit more about escalation. In terms of escalation, who can escalate and transfer from this ellipses dropdown? Well, that depends on your organization's settings for this particular improvement template. There are really three options relating to a person's ability to escalate an improvement that may have been applied to the template by your organization. First scenario is anyone who can edit the improvement. So anyone on the team, the author, assigner, responsible person, collaborator, as well as anyone with the edit or assign permissions for improvements in this location will be able to escalate it, but they're not allowed to select the location it will go to if it can be transferred. So in that case, it would go to that default location we talked about earlier. Second scenario would be anyone who can edit the improvement will have the ability to escalate it, and then they can also select the location that it will go to if it can be transferred. The last would be only people who can assign the improvement. So the assigner and anyone in the system with the assigned permission for improvements in this location would be able to escalate it, and then in turn can also select the location it will go to if it can be transferred. All this will make sense in just a moment when we go into the escalation screen. I also have some screenshots to show you how this can be configured. But essentially, based on how it's been set up on the back end is going to determine if you're able to escalate it, and if you are able to escalate it, if you can choose a transfer location during that process. So let's go into that actual escalate screen here. So we start off with this, what happens when I escalate text? Same people who are immediately notified when you submit a new improvement will be immediately notified of this. If this item is transferred, these notifications will be sent to the locations to which it's transferred. Now, this particular text, for those admins that are on this webinar here today, we can edit this text, okay? So if there is a specific process or specific language that you want to include here underneath this, what happens when I escalate, we do have the ability to set that up for you on the back end. Now, similar to transfer, you're going to have to include a reason for escalation here. So this is going to be a required field. Let's say this is just a webinar test we're doing here. So you will have to include that reason for escalation. And then for this last section of transfer to another location at this time, as I mentioned, this may or may not be available to you when you come in here. So in order to kind of take a look at the different configuration options that we can have here on this screen, let's stop for a second. Let's jump back into our PowerPoint, and I want to take a look at some slides. I've done some screenshots of the 4 different options that you might see here on this screen. And for admins on the webinar today, pay close attention because this is how you can set that up. So with that, let me go find my PowerPoint here. And let's get this shared with you guys. Okay. So here on the screen, the first option that we might see when we go to that escalate section is a user picks, and we have a default transfer. So here we notice we have what happens when I escalate, we have our reason for escalation, and then we have this transfer option by default. It's already selected, and that location in this case is either going to be the level above our current location, or if we specified a different location, that will be here as well. Now, you'll have the ability to, in this scenario, be able to deselect the transfer. And so what that will look like is over here in this screenshot to the right is, rather than transfer it, we're just going to go ahead and escalate, and it's just going to move to the appropriate audience that needs to take action on this. Now, different from this user picks and the default transfer would be the opposite. So the opposite would be user picks, but there is no default, or default is no transfer, right? So here, when you come to this screen, again, you have what happens when I escalate. You'll include your reason for escalation. The transfer to another location at this time is not selected by default. So if you had the ability to and needed to, you would go ahead and select this and then be able to transfer to either by default the location above your location or any other locations that you are going to want to transfer this particular improvement to, or escalate this improvement to, okay? So that's that first option, is whether or not that checkbox is going to be selected or not selected when you come to that screen. There is also the ability to set this up so that it always transfers, okay? So when you come to this screen, you'll see the transfer to another location at this time. The checkbox is selected, and so we're going to need to choose the appropriate location or go with the default location that's displayed here for us. So this would always go ahead and transfer this particular improvement once we've escalated. And then the last option, I'm sure some of you can guess this, would be to never transfer, right? So with the never transfer, when we come in here and we escalate this, we're not going to have the ability to come in here and select to transfer this. It's just going to go to the appropriate location, the appropriate people that we have set up on the back end. So again, admins, 4 different scenarios that you can set this screen up for your users when they're going in and escalating. And definitely be sure to reach out to your customer experience representative to take full advantage of that. They'll be able to help set that up for you for the best use case in your process. All right, let's come back into KaiNexus. So here back in KaiNexus, the next thing that we're going to want to go ahead and do here is, once we've gone ahead and add our reason for escalation, we determined whether we're going to transfer this or not based on how this is configured for us. Let's go ahead and escalate this. So you'll remember this is going to, by default, we have our orthopedics, which is the 1 level above our sports medicine. So it's going to send this now over to our orthopedics location, as well as notify the appropriate people. So let's go ahead and escalate this improvement. So we'll see that we get a message here of those people notified. So in this case, Jake Sussman, who is going to be in that orthopedics location, he's my manager. He's gotten that notification that I've gone in here and escalated this. Perfect. So who is notified when I escalate an improvement? If the improvement is not transferred during that escalation, the person or people who are responsible in your organization for assigning new improvements in your location will be notified of that escalation through an email. Also, anyone who has an opt-in notification preference set for new improvements submitted in your location will also receive some type of notification. Now, if the improvement is transferred during the escalation, the person or people who are responsible for assigning new improvements in that new location you selected will be notified of the escalation through a separate email. Also, anyone who has an opt-in notification preference set for new improvements submitted in that new location will receive a notification, and anyone who has an opt-in notification preference set for improvements that were transferred in that location will receive a notification. Okay. Now, in terms of what you're going to be able to see here in this improvement, we'll notice that I've gone in and escalated. So my responsible location is now updating with that new location that's taking care of this. When I scroll down, we'll see that in my timeline, so it shows that when I escalated this, the comment that I entered when I escalated this, which is being displayed in our comment section, and then the updated responsible location that I chose during that escalation process. So this is where you'll be able to visualize all of what happens once you've escalated an improvement. Okay, so now let's kind of go into the use case. If I've gone in here and I've escalated this improvement, we know that there's going to be some notifications that are going to be going out. How are we going to be able to visualize this and go through a process to take action on this? So let's go ahead and X out of our improvement. We're going to come back to our My Board here. So we'll see first and foremost in the bottom right here, I've constructed a card here for my escalated improvements. So we'll see that find a new co-host improvement, that because I went in and escalated that improvement, I'm able to view this in a card knowing that my manager is now responsible for working on this, or if it's transferred into another location, that they're going to take the action necessary to determine, who needs to work on this, etc. So I've also gone in and set up a manager board. I'm going to come to my board little drop down picker here to go over to our manager board. And now just doing a quick look at our manager board. The manager board is constructed here to include everything that's going on within their department, right? So all of the department tasks, department improvements, department projects, full transparency so that they're able to manage and help out where necessary. Now you'll see with this manager board, I've constructed in the bottom right a escalated improvements card. So that particular find a new co-host improvement that I escalated, my manager is going to get those notifications. They're also going to see that here on the escalated improvements card so that they'll be able to come in here and take action on that particular item. So to help out our admins that are on the webinar here today, in terms of kind of setting up a process like this, setting up in particular a card that's going to visualize escalated improvements, let's go ahead, we'll take a look at our ellipses here, and let's see how the card is actually filtered down. So in this case, we're looking at workflows, improvements, we're looking at type, so what type of improvement do we want to filter down by? It's an improvement. We're taking a look at our location. So this is the user's current location and below. And then this activity is where we're going to be able to identify anything that's escalated. So let's go ahead. I'm going to try and remember all this. Let's go ahead and build this card from scratch if you wanted to add a card like this to your board or add a card to another team member's board. Hit the plus sign in the top right here. We're going to select an item list. So we had called this escalated improvements. And so pick our criteria. We started with our workflow. We wanted to take a look at specifically improvements in the system. This is an extra step. If you go directly to type, it'll essentially show you the same information you need to see. So let's go in, we'll add our type here. And so with this, we want to choose the type of improvement that we want to filter this down by. So we want to make this an improvement. Then we'll remember that because this was a manager, I wanted to see anything that was escalated in location and below. So any of, let's say, my location, and then anything that's going to be in my location and below that's been escalated. And now the last most important piece to this filter for escalation is going to be, we're going to pick a criteria. We're going to go down to activity underneath this specialized section here. And so is any of activity type, we have the option to do escalated. And you can see here, you'd also be able to set up anything transferred as well if you're going to take advantage of that process. So here we can do escalated, activity occurrence count. So the way that we had it set up on that other card is we had it based off of that particular improvement had been escalated once, and that's why it showed up. if we left this as is, it would show all improvements that have been escalated. If we want to see anything that's been escalated once or multiple times, you can come in here and add a specific number. So maybe we only want to see those that have been escalated twice. And then for the activity time frame, you'll be able to filter down any items that were escalated in the last 24 hours all the way through to the last 12 months here as well. So to make this the same as our other card, let's do the escalated once. We'll go ahead and add this item list, and we'll see top left here matches up with that escalated improvements that we had set up earlier. So that is a typical use case to set up on your board a card to be able to view those particular escalated improvements. You'll get the notification once that improvement has been escalated, and then you'll be able to take action as a manager based off of that card. And for our end users, coming back to that My Board, you'll be able to keep track of those particular improvements that you've escalated to make sure that they're being addressed as well. So that wraps up everything that I had here on our agenda. We have about 4 minutes left here. Happy to answer any questions that anyone may have here on the topics that we covered today. All right, so I did get a question here. The question, I was hoping somebody was gonna ask this. This is a great question. So the question is, what if I change the location on an improvement versus transferring or escalating? That's a really great question. So let's go back into our find a new co-host improvement that we were working on here. So here in this improvement, if you have the ability to edit locations, you'll see based off of my role in the system and my permissions, I can come in here and actually just edit this responsible location and change it to another location. Now, keep in mind with the process that we put in place for transferring items and for escalating items, if you were to just go in here and change the responsible location, yes, it would update it here in responsible location. Yes, you would see that change in the timeline, but what you would be missing is that third piece of sending the proper notification to the proper member of your organization who needs to take action on that transferred item or that escalated item. So simply going in and changing the responsible location, basically all you're doing is editing the improvement. You're not putting the process in place to either transfer or escalate so that those particular people will be notified and can take action, okay? So that's a really great question. If you just go in and update that location, if you have the ability to do that, that's not going to help initiate the transfer or escalation process. Great question. Okay, I don't see any other questions that have come through. So before we wrap things up, in terms of our next webinar, we have a top-down improvement webinar being hosted tomorrow by our VP of Sales, Jeff Roussel. Definitely encourage you to sign up for that, 1 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. Also, would love to just point out to everyone interested, we have our 4th annual KaiNexus User Conference, August 29th through 30th. This is an awesome time for KaiNexus users to get together, learn more about Lean, learn more about the KaiNexus software, be able to understand how other organizations are using KaiNexus. Definitely encourage you, if interested, to sign up for our user conference. I believe pricing is set to go up soon, so if you want to reach out to your particular KaiNexus team leaders, or if you're able to sign up for that and come join us in Austin, it's a really fun time. We'd love to have you and see you there. All right, I appreciate everyone's time today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your customer experience rep to take advantage of everything we saw here today with escalation. All right, have a great week. Happy Wednesday, everyone, and keep improving.